I've got a puzzle for us to figure out. We have three computers. Host A is on subnet 1, host C is on subnet 2, and host B sits in between them and is on both subnets 1 and 2. The question is, using a private key on host A, how do we get to host C despite it being on a completely different subnet? Are we stuck? Well, no, I wouldn't be making this video if that was the case. We just use something called SSH key hopping. Key hopping is when your private key stays on host A, but you temporarily forward it through host B so you can hop over the subnet to host C without ever copying the private key. System administrators in large enterprises use key hopping for jump boxes and bastion hosts. Pen testers use key hopping for pivoting and lateral movement. Today I'll break down what key hopping is, how to set it up, and how to use it. I like the term key hopping because it describes what's really happening. Your access is jumping from one subnet to the next. In the industry, though, this is technically called agent forwarding. And that's why when I run the real command, I use the capital A option because I'm telling SSH to forward my agent like this. SSH-A for agent, and then we're going to go the username vero at host B, and you see it lets us into host B right there. And now we're going to go SSH vero at host C. And you see it lets us into host C right there. That's because I set up the agent on host B here by using the -A option. Now, seeing this in action is great and all, but if we don't understand what is actually taking place under the hood, we won't be able to troubleshoot this when we inevitably run into issues. So let's take a step back. Let's stop thinking about computers for a minute, and instead let's see what the key hopping or agent forwarding process would look like if human beings were doing it. You have three people, person A, person B in the middle, and person C. A says to B, "Hey, can we connect?" B says to A, "Sure, just prove to me you are who you say you are." So A hands B their identification card. B takes a look at it and says, "ID card checks out, let's connect." B then turns to person C and says, "Hey, can we connect?" C says to person B, "Sure, just prove that you are authorized to talk to me." B says, "Well, I don't have my ID on me, but my buddy over here has a token stating that I am authorized to talk to you." B then turns to A and says, "Hey, can I borrow that ID card?" So A hands over a temporary ID card to B. Person B then in turn hands over the temp ID to person C. C takes a look at the temp ID and says, "Hey, that looks great. Let's go ahead and connect." Okay, that's the human version. Now let me walk you through what the same process looks like inside your computer network. Again, we have three computers, A, B, and C. Again, host A starts by asking host B if they can connect with the -A option. Host B responds with, "Okay, prove who you are to me." Host A says, "Okay, here's some proof of my identification." Host B takes a look at it and says, "That looks good. We can connect." So the two machines then create an SSH connection. And the agent, or socket, is created between the two because the -A option was utilized. Then host B turns to host C and says, "Hey, can we connect?" Host C responds with, "Sure, but first prove who you are to me." Host B relays the authentication request through the agent back to host A. Host A signs the challenge with its private key and sends the signed proof back. Host B then hands the signed challenge or temp ID card to host C as proof that they are authorized to connect. Host C takes a look at it and says, "All right, looks great. Let's go ahead and connect." And then the two hosts create another SSH connection. Bear in mind that for this to work, hosts B and C must both already have the matching public key for the private key residing on host A. So we're not willy-nilly throwing random IDs around and getting authenticated. This has to be pre-planned. The point of this strategy is to use key pair authentication because it's so much more secure than usernames and passwords, and to also not have to copy your private key everywhere, since the more you copy your private key, the more dangerous and less secure your setup. Now, this mental model is conceptual, but it's a pretty good representation of what is happening under the hood in this scenario, and it will get you 80% of the way to understand key hopping. This is definitely enough understanding to begin setting this up in your own lab, so let's do that together. In order to forward an agent to host B, we first need to create it on our origin machine, host A. So first I'll show you the slow way to help you understand what is happening, and then I will show you the fast method you can use after you understand it. Understanding always beats copying and pasting commands. So we'll start out with ssh-agent, and this tells us how to set it up, but it hasn't actually set anything up yet. So what we need to do to actually execute these commands is we need to copy them, and then we'll run this. So we need to copy the socket plus the export SSH auth sock. And then after we've done that, we need to copy the SSH agent PID and the export command containing SSH agent PID. We'll copy that. We'll run that. So what typing SSH agent does is it simply shows you what needs to be set up. It doesn't actually set it up for you, which is why we have to copy and paste these commands. This is essentially setting up the PID. The export command makes the PID available to the child process of SSH. I'm not going to get too deep into parent processes and child processes here because that's outside the scope of the video, but that's essentially what's happening. Now, if you want to see the shortcut for this, all we have to do is run this command. We'll clear our screen, and then we'll do the shortcut like this: eval quote $, open parentheses, SSH dash agent, close parentheses, quote, and then we'll hit enter. And this will automatically set everything up for us. Now, if we want to check to see if this worked, we can type echo. And again, this is just to confirm, SSH auth underscore sock. We're making sure the variables exist. Put a semicolon there because we're going to run two separate commands in one line. Echo SSH agent PID. Then we'll hit enter. You can see here that the PID is 15723. This is the agent. And you can see here that it says, hey, I set up agent PID 15723, and that indeed matches what is down here when we echoed it. Now that we've created the socket/agent, we need to connect it to the correct private key. You can't just set up the agent. You actually have to fill it with the correct private key that you would like to forward to the next host. So let's do that right now, and the command for that is ssh-add, and then we'll go home/ssh, and then in my case, the one I'm using is ID underscore 25519. It's asking me for the passphrase. Since I put a passphrase on this private key, we'll hit enter, and here you see it says identity added, and then it gives me the full path. So that's how we know that it worked. But if we want to check, because we're paranoid, we can go ssh-add-l, and here it shows you, here's the key that's added. So let's clear our screen, and let's confirm that this indeed worked. Let's go ssh-a to forward the agent to host B. We'll put in our username, host-b, and we'll hit enter. And you see there that it got us into host B. Now let's pivot over to host C. And here we'll just type SSH vero because we don't need to forward the agent this time. We can if we want to pivot to a fourth host, but because we're just going straight to the next host with the forwarded key, we're just typing like normal at host-c. We'll hit enter, and there we are. We pivoted over to host C. Now, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And this is an advanced topic, so if you haven't yet, I encourage you to go back and follow along, building this in your own lab, because let's be real, in the end, that's where real learning takes place. I've been doing this a long time, 15 years actually, and while I do know a lot, it's not possible to know everything in this field of work because there is just too much to learn. But the best piece of advice I can give you is to learn something new every day. And then it won't be fast, but slowly, day by day and brick by brick, you will truly build a body of knowledge into something that can be admired. And you can get paid for it too. Let's be honest. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.